Hello, this is John Labman coming to you from Eastern Pennsylvania in Hollycon, and I'm going to read an article that I just wrote on Substack because I want it to be in video form as well. And this one is called No Escape, Enlightenment or Not, We're Stuck Being Human. And the subtitle is Enlightenment or Liberation is Wrong About the No Self. It's not possible to kill the ego. Ego death is not possible. You'd have to kill the left brain in order to kill the ego, and that would be like having a stroke in the whole of the left brain. And this is the first time I'm willing to challenge one of the core tenets of the mystical path, that there is a promised land called death of the ego, or no self. I can't believe I have the nerve to do it. I can't believe either that I haven't noticed this blatant inconsistency sooner or had the nerve to call it out sooner. I just didn't have the nerve to put it together while every spiritual teacher I've ever followed was always claiming that ego death and no self is the goal of the path, and they've achieved it. Was what they were actually doing repressing the left brain or their emotional responses? That's one possibility. In the non-dual teaching of the Eastern mystical paths, and most mystical paths, there is the promised land that we will all allegedly reach called the no self or ego death. This mythological state keeps people seeking more experts and gurus and pathways even after they've long achieved peace, contentment, reduced reactivity, a sense of oneness with all that is, and compassion. Of course, the majority of the population of the world never experiences this. They're lost in the matrix of their false thoughts and their false generated feelings. However, seekers don't notice they're improving lives because they're still focused on the no self or ego death as the goal of the liberation or enlightenment path. I mean, that's what moksha or liberation means, we think. And I should know. I'm one who kept looking for 54 years. And last summer, someone named Emerson of emersonnonduality.com helped me to stop looking after I'd wandered into yet another path, the Buddhist feta work. This latest wandering occurred through the discovery of a currently rising and now famous teacher, and had me letting yet another so-called expert, and mind you, not even the teacher himself, but an assistant, tell me that I was or wasn't too reactive to be in a condition of no self, as if they could possibly know from a brief conversation my internal reactions and responses and whether they fit into the idea of no self or not, which was, by the way, another idea. Trying to escape the human condition has made me a terrible fool often, I have to admit. Fortunately, our brains seek truth because that truth is required for homeostasis or balance or the relaxation of the body-mind. In other words, our body, mind, and brains are self-correcting if we let them be. And because of that, I didn't stay stuck waiting for another guru or teacher's approval again. I am, after all, turning 70 next week. It's time for this bull crap to stop. I agree that the center of gravity can shift from ego, left brain, to awareness or consciousness as experienced through the right brain. And the machinations of the ego can definitely be seen through, and we can become aware of its tricks that get us ensnared in creating new identity, even a spiritual identity. Oh, now I'm a teacher. Or we can also see that the ego ensnares us in creating a new problem that now will define a new version of me that equates me with problem. However, the little voice in my head that is the ego can't be killed. It doesn't die. That's a spiritual myth. I go far to say it's even a lie. How can I say that? How dare I challenge the mystical dogma? Well, there's actually no evidence that human beings can function without the left brain, including that part of the left brain that produces language. It's over here. If you've watched my videos, you've seen me point to this before. The language centers are what produce the ego or narrator of this individual life. The left brain can't be turned off if we're to function in a three-dimensional world. Therefore, the voice in my head can't be turned off permanently either. That would mean brain damage or left brain death and an inability to function in the world. Again, it's as if I've had a stroke and the entire left brain has gone dead. That would be ego death. Not only that, but without the left brain, we have no memory of any of the lessons we've learned in our lives. So the point of taking an incarnation to learn lessons, if one believes in reincarnation, would be null and void. If there was no memory of what I have learned in this lifetime, what's the point of having a lifetime? If ego totally disappears, then we have no emotional memory, no verbal memory, no identity. We'd literally be walking around enthralled and in nirvana, woohoo, but bumping into trees because we couldn't distinguish them from our own body. That's a left brain function. We certainly couldn't help anybody else into a life of peace and minimal suffering because we wouldn't be able to talk. I did my first ever AI search, artificial intelligence, oh my God, using Grok 3 to see what evidence was presented that ego death was possible. According to the Grok 3 AI researcher, there is no scientific evidence that the default mode network of the brain can be permanently turned off. None. There is anecdotal evidence that its volume can be turned down, allegedly, in some long-term meditators. And then there is a claim that some people actually experience a condition of no self. When I hear about them, it sounds mostly like they have no emotional response to anything anymore, no investment in their own life anymore, and a sort of almost a dissociation from life. Although I haven't really talked to anyone who claims that. I've only talked to a friend who has such a friend who claims that. However, the two people named as possible examples of no self by the AI search Grok 3 have a couple of flaws, just a couple. One has recently been exposed as having sex with his students and running a cult that people have a hard time leaving, often because they've donated all their money. I also know direct stories of Buddhist Rinpoches and lamas who violated their celibacy. This I know from clients, and or have sexually abused followers, let alone the host of Catholic and Christian priests and pastors, many of whom have been in the news lately. Oh, and they're spiritual. Okay. The Easterners particularly are all supposed to be enlightened or liberated, so have no self. And yet, this one particular guy that they mention is perpetrating these abuses against his followers. A friend of mine whom I trust is working with people fleeing from the same Grok 3 referenced guy's cult. He's supposed to be one that even Grok 3 says has no self. Ha! No ego there, huh? What are we, nuts? Are we supposed to believe that there's no self because someone says so? Or because of evidence? That's a rhetorical question, obviously. Does someone sexually abusing his followers have no ego? Notice I said followers. Interesting Freudian slip. Somebody who falls for his con. What I meant to say was, does someone sexually abusing his followers have no ego or no self? Don't think so. The other person Grok 3 mentions is a well-known author whose writing I've benefited from in early books of his. But this person with no self, this one is always on Facebook and other social media platforms selling books and courses. Is that an absence of self or a death of ego? Huh? If there's ego death, who is there who teaches? Who is there to care about teaching? Or about getting followers? Or about selling books or courses? So, dear listener, I would spare you the insane waste of time that I spent, that it is to seek for the condition of liberation or enlightenment if you assume that means you'll get to a condition of no functional ego, death of ego, or a condition of no self. There is no scientific evidence that we can live without the functioning left brain and language it creates. That language being what most of us think of as I. There is no escape, therefore. We are stuck, living with a functioning sense of a unique individuality, even though it isn't fixed and doesn't need to be defended unless someone's lying about us. We are stuck, living with a full complement of pesky, annoying, untruthful thoughts and the roiling emotions that come from those false thoughts. We're also stuck with dealing with the pain of people and pets we love who die, the daily cruelty of life, the harshness and lies of politicians in any political party, the betrayal we experience in life, the abuse, and the pain and death and injustice we see everywhere. And that's all the stuff that we don't like as humans. I'm not mentioning all the pleasures and joys of life here because we don't run away from those. But we look for ego death or no self because we want to get away from all this stuff. We might have to learn to accept and learn from all this difficulty. But the human condition, including some kind of sense of self or ego, only ends at one point. It's called death. It doesn't end in an alleged ego death. So we have to learn how to be competent human beings and deal with our thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations with expertise, as well as being able to access the sense of oneness, of eternity, of infinity, and love, contentment, freedom, peace, and truthfulness that's inherently our divine being, mediated or traveling into us, if you will, through the right brain. The only people who might experience a temporary condition of no self or ego death are those who live in caves, have food brought to them, and don't speak to other human beings ever. They might live without thought or emotion other than physical discomfort while living in that kind of seclusion. Bring them back into interacting with people and having to think and speak, however, and their left brains and egos will miraculously resurrect because they were never dead in the first place, just on pause. Put them in charge of devotees and followers, and they often take advantage of their alleged no-self state to use, abuse, and manipulate the followers. Spiritual literature and history is rife with examples of this kind of abuse, as you can also hear and see in current news stories, as I've mentioned above, some of the Christian and other religions of the world. The other group of people who might experience a condition of no self are the users of certain psychedelics. Those substances can temporarily interrupt the default mode network in the brain that creates the narration of an I who is experiencing things. However, as I've learned from some clients who have tried these substances, the effects are temporary. I even had one guy coming to me after a couple of trips saying, "Please help me to stay in this condition." But he wanted an instant answer and he left pretty quickly. I have to say, bitterly disappointed myself, realizing that I've believed in this mythology, that someday I'd finally ascend above human thoughts, feelings, and struggles. But while reality might be disappointing to that hope, I no longer lie to myself, nor can I be manipulated by people allegedly in a condition of ego death or no self. No more mythology for me, maybe no more for you too. I'm still grappling with a huge disappointment that this is. Having trouble even waking up early from sleep with grief, and experiencing a kind of grief that's almost beyond words. Oddly enough, though, I'm not depressed, I'm relieved. I'm not chasing mythology anymore, and neither should you. I know that the divinity we are, and the humanity that we must be until the end of our lives, can interact peacefully. However, I now know that the work of dealing with the challenging thoughts and emotions of the left brain will not stop while we're alive. What do? We have to bring the love, presence, surrender to reality, and the compassion of the right brain connection we have to the divine to the left brain when it's in pain. In other words, we must both be adept at being human beings and adept at connecting with the divinity that we are. The right brain really should rule us as human beings, and we'll be happier if it does. But it can and never should extinguish the left brain. The two must be fully integrated, as must their very different points of view on how life is. And this, to me, has now become the new version of liberation or enlightenment. I hope that's helpful to you. It's been an absolute revelation to me. All the best from here in Eastern Pennsylvania. Lots of love and compassion for humanity and your own humanity as you cope with it. Thanks for listening and for dealing with the verbal errors of this all too human person. Take care now. See you soon.